So,
Yeah, I was
I
going to
mean,
ask you about ozone later, but since you brought it up, I mean, and we will get to movement, by the way. I'm coming back to movement right after this because we're
all good,
we're at an hour and I want to get to movement. But
all good. Yeah.
ozone, what? Because I know you've done a lot of work with ozone. Uh, Under what circumstances do you use it, and particularly for your own life? And where do you kind of look and say to a client like, "Hey, this may suit you"?
Ozone is for me a bit of technology, if you will, or a bit of this whole biohacking space that is probably one of my biggest staples.
Hmm.
And I have to say, I am very, and I'll make no claims here, but I am very happy that I have ozone technology of many sorts throughout this pandemic.
Hmm.
And I'll kind of leave it at that. But,
Yeah.
um, I do everything from making ozonated water,
Hmm.
and so I can drink the ozonated water. And I'm a believer in being efficient and not wasting anything. So and we could obviously dive down this hole if we need to, but when you're making ozone, there's an oxygen, a medical grade or industrial grade oxygen component.
Hmm.
So the oxygen feeds into a generator. I'm sure you probably know this, but for the
No,
listeners,
no, keep
um,
going.
you've got your medical grade oxygen that feeds into a generator that creates the ozone, and then that ozone would then either be bubbled through a water bubbler or an oil bubbler, just to make the experience of the ozone feel better to the body.
Hmm.
And so, like, if I want to make ozonated water, which is something I try to do every morning, just depends on what my timing is like. If I have an extra 10 to 15 minutes or 20 minutes even, I'll make ozonated water. Now, when I'm making the ozonated water, the ozone actually bubbles through the water and then comes out into either a destruct, which is like this carbon and charcoal filter,
Hmm.
which keeps it from going into the air, into the atmosphere,
Yeah.
like so that you don't breathe it in. Because if you breathe it in, it can be very harmful to the lung tissue, right?
Yep.
Um, but if you do it right, you actually can breathe it in. There is an ozone inhalation therapy, and we'll talk about that in a second. But
Hmm.
um, instead of taking it into a destruct system, I figured, okay, we may as well do something else. So I'll have that extra ozone go into either an insufflation bag. So there's an
Okay.
ozone bag, or I'll have it go through the little stethoscope thing for the ears,
Yeah.
so I can get ozone through my head and my ears, and it clears up brain fog and things of that nature.
Hmm.
Or I'll have it go through some other apparatus so that I'm not wasting it, right?
Yeah.
So it's the byproduct that's coming off can either be wasted into the destruct or it can be utilized. And so I usually utilize it. And so
Hmm.
with that, I will take that bag and either do nasal insufflation. So I'll kind
Hmm.
of point that bag at my nose or in my mouth without breathing it.
Yep.
Okay. And so one of my techniques for doing that is I just take the bag, unclip it, and I push it. It's almost like an accordion or whatever. Like you push that bag. Actually, what is it? Bagpipe. It's like a bagpipe,
Nice.
right?
Good old
Yeah.
Scottish instrument.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like a bagpipe, and it allows the gas to come out of that bag and into whatever orifice you want it to go. And so I usually choose the mouth, then I close my mouth, and then I slowly exhale out of my nose. So I make sure to get ozone into my nasal cavity,
But the
right?
the the key for people here is not to inhale, correct?
Bingo.
Okay.
Do not inhale.
Hmm.
And if you don't know how to breathe properly, don't breathe well, then I would probably not have a person do that, because
Yeah.
it is tricky. And so that's one way though that I do it.
Hmm.
If there's a person who, let's say they have a stopped up nose or stuffy nose, or they feel like they're coming up with like a cold or flu, then I'll just point that at their nose and kind of have them hold their breath pointed at their nose with their head tilted back, and you feel it. I mean, it's like whoosh. And a lot of times people expect it to be like you feel amazing right away, but what happens usually is, even if you feel okay, what happens is it brings up all of this mucus and biofilms and all kinds of stuff that were hidden,
Yeah.
that all of a sudden come up. And so sometimes I get the question of like, are you sure this is good for me? Because I now feel like I'm, you know,
Yeah.
stuffing stuff up, and my nose is clogged a little bit more than it was. I say, don't worry, it'll go away, because it's bringing up the bad stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's attacking the bad stuff. So that's one way. Then there's drinking the water, which is going to obviously affect the digestive system. My favorite, well, maybe it's not my favorite way, but one of the most impactful ways is rectal insufflation.
Yeah. So it's like, is this sort of similar to like a coffee enema and how you introduce that?
Yeah. So what I actually do, good point, is I either do a coffee enema first, just to clean out the colon, to then introduce that same bag, but it has a connection to a catheter on the end. And so I would do a coffee enema, or I would do that ozonated water. I would use that as the enema source. So I do the enema first, clean out the colon, and then reintroduce the insufflation bag with the ozone direct through the rectum. And that is about 95% as effective as direct IV, or having your blood taken out into a bag, ozonated, and put it back into the body.
And
it's about 90.
That's like 10 pass style, right? So
Yes, exactly. And it's like, look, of course I've done the direct IV, I've done the passes, I've done all of that stuff, but what's the easiest? It's easiest to, go into the comfort of your own bathroom, set up your own ozone, and make it happen.
Yeah, you don't have to go to a facility. I don't know if they do it at Bulletproof Upgrade Labs or anything like that, but there's certain facilities, at least here, that do 10 pass, and that is a little bit more out of the way than doing it in your own home, right? So
bingo. It takes time, and not a lot of people are comfortable with needles, and to be quite honest with you, the last time I did a couple passes, I wasn't able to finish because of the reactions. They had to stick me on my arm 5 times.
Yeah.
3 times on the right, 2 on the left, and it was just kind of like annoying, right? And here I am thinking, like, why didn't I just do this at home?
yeah, it's not as enjoyable, that's for sure. Getting pricked with something is never enjoyable.
Right.
But, okay, so we're going to get to this part of the conversation where we're going to talk about movement, because like, of the people that I follow and kind of actually listen to when it comes to movement, you're definitely one of those. And so when you look at movement for individuals, I've heard you talk about both high intensity interval training and blood flow restriction as kind of key aspects of that. If there's another one that's come up, just like awareness has come up, let me know. But why those two? Is it purely because of the clientele, or is there something special about those
two? Very good question. Okay, so yes, to answer your question at the beginning, if there's something else that's come up, I think it's more about, like, there's something else that's always been at the forefront or a part of the foundation, which is primal movement or innate movement, first and foremost.
What do you mean by that?
So crawling, and crawling and climbing and balancing. These are things that I use as an assessment first and foremost. Then we progress into the other. So when you speak about the high intensity and the blood flow restriction and all the other stuff that you probably see me talk a lot about and see on my social media, that's usually because I've taken it from that foundation, right? Because I created this thing called MAP, which is movement analysis pattern. And that movement analysis pattern came about kind of like the quality awareness edition. It came about because I kept noticing that every client that I worked with, almost at some point or another, we would come back to something, which was, hey, you lack mobility in X, Y, or Z, right? And so I wanted to create something that would allow me to see that first and foremost, and allow that person to see that. and it's something that we could do every single session. And
Mm-hmm.
and so that is a simple sort of 10-step movement protocol that allows me and the client to see, hey, I need to be working on something else than how many reps and how much time and, you know, how many days a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so once we do a movement analysis pattern, then I almost prescribe, okay, we need to now make you crawl.
Mm-hmm.
And crawling, it's almost like taking steps back to being a baby and going through the movement milestones before we go into better movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I want a person to move better, I need to see how well they crawl. I want to see, can you get up from the ground without using your hands? Can
Mm-hmm.
you get down to the ground without using your hands? What happens if you are walking down the street and you fall? Do you know how to fall properly? That comes back to my martial arts training.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there is a proper way to fall, right? And if your body is sound, then you probably won't hurt yourself as much if you do happen to fall. And that also goes back to, well, chances are you probably won't fall, or you won't fall as badly if you don't have on very shod shoes, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it goes back to that whole barefoot technology. So
Yeah.
we've got all these photo, or not photo, well, I guess you could call them photoreceptors, but we have these receptors in the bottoms of our feet that are very much like the receptors in our hands.
Mm-hmm.
And it's designed to really feel our environment. And so chances are, I always ask the question, can you think of a time that you yourself or anybody you know has rolled their ankle while being barefoot? And I don't even have to wait for the answer. The chances are no,
Yeah.
right?
It's usually wearing some ridiculous shoe, right?
Bingo. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The last time that I rolled my ankle was a couple of weeks ago playing basketball,
Mm-hmm.
wearing basketball shoes.
Yeah.
And it frustrates me to no end because, you know, being a basketball player, like, you know, I have gone to the extent of playing basketball in my Vivos, you know.
Yeah, I was gonna say Vivo needs to make a basketball shoe.
I'm working on that. I'm working on that. Yeah. And you know, you'll probably see me doing some more of that because I'm trying to do less harm to my own body. But
Mm-hmm.
going back to like the movement piece is, you know, I think anybody listening right now, if you take a moment to assess what your deep squat is, like, and maybe I can give you the link to that movement analysis pattern that
Mm-hmm.
I was talking about.
It's on your
But
website, right?
yeah, it's on my
I
website.
think I've seen it. I'll link to it in the show notes for everybody.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because, you know, the first thing you're asked to do is a deep
Mm-hmm.
squat.
Yeah.
Okay, now everybody
And
has a different type of deep squat.
what percentage of your clients can actually do a deep squat like the first time you see them?
Woo. Well, yeah, that's a tough one to answer. I would say what percentage of people can do a deep squat well
Yeah.
is far less than just getting into the shape, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, we can identify a shape,
Mm-hmm.
but then we can also qualify that shape, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, can you get down into a deep squat with your feet mostly pointed straight forward and your back is in a, you know, I wouldn't say it has to be straight because people who do squat well, that like maybe use that squat for a resting position or to use the bathroom or whatever, you might notice that they actually do have a rounded back, and
Yeah.
that's okay as long as you're not loaded, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's why movement is such a nuanced thing, and
Yeah.
I treat it as such. You know, I don't just say, "Hey, do 100 squats, do some burpees, do some pull-ups, and pay me my money." No, I want to I want to assess what a person looks like, and so a good deep squat for you, Boomer, might be different than a good deep squat for me.
Yeah.
But can you get into a deep squat? And that usually causes people to go, "Wait a minute." Without me saying it, that creates awareness right
Mm-hmm.
away. So that's why I love doing the movement analysis pattern right away. And I promise you, anybody that clicks on the link, when they see it and they start to do it, they're going to immediately become aware of their own body. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a tool that creates awareness. And then we can use that to then kind of prescribe a movement protocol.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, so then you might notice, wow, like my heels come up. Okay, why?
Mm-hmm.
right? Remember, anytime you ask a question, it's an opportunity to educate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, chances are your calves are too tight. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of people think, oh no, it's probably because of my knees and it's because of my hips. And so, okay, if that's what you think, that's fine. Let's put a towel or a bar or something underneath your heels, and let's see if you can get into a deep squat. Boom, they go all the way down into the most beautiful deep squat. And I
Mm-hmm.
go, okay, why do you think that is? I don't know. Well, you thought it was your hips that prevented you from going down. You thought it was your knees, but you just showed now that your hips and your knees allowed you to do that. It's because your ankle does not like a certain degree of dorsiflexion.
Mm-hmm.
Dorsiflexion means, pulling the toes up towards your shin, right? So if you do not have a good range, a good amount of flexibility at that ankle, I'll call it the angle at the ankle. If that angle at the ankle does not want to reduce, so if we go from a standard sort of 90 degrees just standing, if we can't get down to 45 degrees, chances are we're not going to be able to be in a good squat.
Yeah.
Otherwise, other systems are compromised, the knee or the hip.
Mm-hmm.
So then they go, well, what do I need to do? Okay, well, let's good question. Let's target the calves. Let's target the ankle. Let's actually target the foot. So then we can go into really working on foot flexibility,
Mm-hmm.
because, again, it starts from the ground up. And so
Yeah.
when I do a warm up with a person, I start from the ground up. I start by wiggling the toes. And if you've seen any kind of videos of me doing classes or teaching any kind of online stuff, chances are I'm going to spend about 5 to 10 minutes working on the toes and then working up through the body. And
Mm-hmm.
I do a thing called joint rolls. And basically the idea behind that is just working through all of the joints that you can imagine. Again, that makes you aware of all the many joints that we have in our bodies, right? So it's an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to educate the person in front of me or the group in front of me that we have a bunch of different joints in this skeleton that we're kind of moving around throughout the day that can be optimized. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you can't pick up your toes on demand independently of the other toes, then we have a problem. And you also might be thinking, well, wait, how can you tell if I'm picking up my toes independent of the other toes if I have shoes on? Well, that answers your own question. Take off your shoes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but you still can't really see if it. Okay, well, now take off your socks. That answers your own question, right?
Mm-hmm.
So most, if not all, of my sessions are barefoot.
Okay.
So so it's we could talk for days about this kind of stuff because this is what I'm really fascinated with. But I hope to plant the seed, pun
Yeah.
intended. I hope to plant the seed to anyone listening to this that we need to start focusing more on the capabilities of our body and how we can open up all the different systems and tissues throughout our bodies to optimize our movement. Then we can go into focusing on, okay, what high intensity interval training protocols do you like?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I love a Tabata protocol,
Mm-hmm.
but okay, well, what should I do in that Tabata protocol? Well, I'm going to probably start with isometrics, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's this really cool exercise, if you will, called the 8-point plank by my friends at Foundation Training,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Eric Goodman and Jesse Salas. They taught.
Dr. Goodman saved my back in the past, so that's
He's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, I've had the distinct pleasure of working with him, and we actually did a video for scoliosis because of my scoliosis.
Yeah.
We did a video together. Should be coming out at some point, and then I've been able to work closely with them here in LA, and he's now just moved on to Hawaii. But being able to work with him is a pretty cool deal. In fact, I'm gonna have him on my podcast at some point. But
Mm-hmm.
learning how to do proper decompression breathing
Mm-hmm.
is, and expanding the rib cage helps with my back, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, wait a minute. So doing that and then maybe holding a plank, an 8-point plank with a Tabata protocol, which would be 20 seconds of work, 10 seconds of rest. It's a plank. And most people are like, oh, come on, dude. Like, should I do some squats? Should I do some
Yeah.
push-ups?
Do most people just want to be crushed? And then
Yeah.
you're like, hey, you want them to do isometrics. Like, I
Yeah.
imagine most people are just like, okay, when are the squats coming? When are the cleans coming? That kind of stuff.
Right. I always say, hey, at any point of my interaction with you, at any point, I can crush you. Trust me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sure.
That's not the benefit you're going to get from working with me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I always say to people, I'm happy to say that, we won't work together. I'm happy to refer you to somebody else that can maybe serve that purpose for you. But when you work with me, my goal is to optimize your movement
Mm-hmm.
and optimize your health. And if that means sitting like this and never doing an actual exercise, and maybe teaching you about awareness and sleep and recovery and consumption and activeness,
Mm-hmm.
then go and do your exercise elsewhere. That's fine. So, but to also answer your question about so I touched on the high intensity interval training.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's important. I do think it's good. And I think that, there's so many tools that I've been using for that. For instance, lately throughout the pandemic, I've been using the Inertia Wave, which I love.
And you convinced me to get one. So like, okay, we can get into the inertia wave.
Okay.
Before I get into the inertia wave though, why isometrics first? Because you're going to have Johnny CrossFit, for instance, that's like, hey, why don't you, and I make fun of CrossFit because I used to be one of those guys.
Same.
But, why don't we do, for our Tabatas, why don't we do sit-ups, push-ups, squats, all of that stuff, right? Why isometrics?
Okay, so with isometrics, it brings about a component of stability endurance or strength endurance. I think teaching the body to stabilize in more ways than one at different systems, I think is important. It's an important component because it's like for instance, if you do need to have a barbell, you feel like you want to just wrap your hands around a cold piece of steel, fine.
Mm-hmm.
Then do an overhead hold. Hold that isometrically so that you can teach your body to stabilize, so that when you get to a point where your form starts to suffer, then the stabilizers will kind of kick in and help you, keep you safe.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have strong stabilizer systems in our body. And stabilization doesn't necessarily mean stuck in one position, right? For instance, crawling, right? So we can call it dynamic stabilization.
Yeah.
So that's what a crawl shows. That's why I like crawling.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in this, what we call foot to hand crawl, which you're basically on all fours. You can be on your hands and your knees, or you can have your knees off the ground. But just holding that position would be an isometric plank, right? But the moment you take a few steps, you've now changed that into a dynamic stabilization. So it's isometrics, especially at the core.
Yeah.
But you're dynamically moving. And so you're teaching your body to kind of be independent, but you're using this strong foundation of the core to help you move through other parts of your body. So I feel like it makes the system so much more sound and so much stronger, and it keeps you out of pain. It keeps you out of injury. So that's why I feel like, because, look, can you stabilize? Can you stand on one foot for a minute? Can you, and if you can't, then why would you ever then go into a lunge when you may have the possibility of injuring yourself or incorrectly dropping the ankle or the knee inside of the hip? I mean, I want to see, can you stabilize in all these positions first, right? Can you do a handstand hold, which would mimic an overhead press, right? Can you hang from a bar? If you want to do pull-ups, okay, show me that you can hang, because that's going to teach your system to adapt to the isometrics. And then you can always take it up another notch, So even in CrossFit, when I was doing CrossFit a lot, I got to the point where I was doing CrossFit competitions and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I always appreciated the isometric components because
Yeah.
I saw what it did to my body, and
Mm-hmm.
not only aesthetically but also like functionally. I
Mm-hmm.
saw the changes. So yeah, that's why I like it. So it just keeps
The
going.
Inertia Wave. Okay, mine arrived yesterday. I enjoy because anything that's portable, like for instance, blood flow restriction training, which I'm sure we'll get to here in a second. Uh, it's super portable. It's a lot of fun. People in the park look at me like I'm weird, but what do you enjoy about it?
Exactly what you just mentioned. I feel like because I'm a traveler, I'm constantly traveling. Even during this pandemic situation, I've been, I guess, fortunate or been called to travel a lot. So I need to have tools that are easy for me to put in a bag and easy for other people to see. Like, oh wow, okay, this is really all you need. Um, I use the Inertia Wave as a resistance band tool
Mm-hmm.
apparatus, so you can do curls and you know wood choppers and all kinds of different movements with the resistant component. But then you can also get into that metabolically demanding high intensity interval training like we talked about before,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where the core stability really comes into play, because if
Mm-hmm.
you don't have a sound core when trying to perform these exercises, one, you will quickly see that you need to work on that, right? Because
Yeah.
you probably able to do more than 10 seconds of any of the moves. But also it brings in this sort of this motor skill development where you need to also work on your movement patterning. So, and that comes back to that neurological patterning in the brain, to be able to do this back and forth drumming motion, so to speak, right? Like what they call the hero wave. Um, for me, that was very second nature because I played the drums. I
Yeah.
played the drums, and to be able to multitask, to truly multitask, rubbing your belly and patting your head, and which is something I incorporate into my training as well, and different things around that. That's what this shows, because if you don't have a good, what is the word? Coordination. Yeah. If you don't
Yeah.
have proper coordination, you quickly will see that the inertia that is being created in a wave, it has the amplitude, and it goes up and it comes down like a true wave. If your body doesn't work within that, at some point it'll go off, and the inertia wave will show you that immediately.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you might see that one hand or one side works better than the other side.
Yeah.
So it becomes a diagnostic tool. And I see it all the time. The light bulb comes on and a person quickly sees, I'm maybe not as coordinated as I thought I was, at
Mm-hmm.
least this, right? And then, I give a few cues, and I'll just simply say, don't fight the wave. Don't fight it. Work with it. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's easier, like with the duo. The duo is the one where two people are using it, right, on either end,
Mm-hmm.
instead of anchoring it. What I'll do is I'll have the person who's finding it difficult to work within the wave, I'll have them just hold it.
Mm-hmm.
You just pull back, hold it. It works that posterior chain, and then let me do all the work so you can feel it. And it, again, comes all the way back to awareness. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so so I love the inertial wave for that. I also love the Katsu bands or any kind of blood flow restriction bands because they're portable and they
Mm-hmm.
have a big bang for their buck.
Yeah, I was
Huge.
gonna say. I mean, like blood flow restriction training to me seems like you're cheating in some ways. Like it's
I
just
agree.
the return for the time and the weight that you have to move is just absurd.
Yeah.
And so, like, I am very late to the game on blood flow restriction training. But how did you get introduced to that?
Yeah, so I had heard about it, off and on for quite some time, but I almost, like, I don't know why, but I kind of resisted it because I just thought it was only for meatheads, right? I thought it was
Yeah.
only for bodybuilders. And I'm a guy that is worried less about the aesthetic. I'm more worried about the function. And maybe it was incorrect of any of the people promoting BFR back when I first saw it. maybe it was incorrect on their side of only showing like big muscle bound guys, but that's what turned me off.
Yeah.
And then let's see what I think I came across. I ended up interviewing a guy who created BFR bands, online, those black and red bands. And I just bought a set. I know why. So I was for a while there. I was working with Liev Schreiber, right? And he was telling me how he loved BFR. And I already had my BFR bands, the ones that you can get on Amazon for like $30.
Yeah.
I had those, and I was kind of wondering, like, why is he raving about this so much? Well, come to find out, I think he was actually using Katsu or Be Strong, one of those, right? And the doctors that he was working with, they were using it for rehab after clients, having surgery and things like that. And so it caused me to dive deeper, because I'm like, okay, he's a high level guy. Let me look into this a little bit more. So I started doing my research, and I finally decided to pull the trigger on buying Katsu, because again, I invest a lot of my money, my hard-earned money, back into everything that I do. Likewise. If nothing else, to help people save money, right? I can tell you, hey, look, I got this and I got that. This is not worth it, but this probably is, right? And so I got it, and my mind was blown. In fact, after I had the BFR bands, and I heard Liev talking about his, then I met a guy. It was actually the night after I interviewed the guy with BFR bands. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I think his name is Kusha. Kusha, yeah. Anyway, after I interviewed him, the next night I was invited to a talk with Dr. Palvin at some kind of biohacking conference. Yeah. And in the back, there was a guy set up. He was kind of like he taught different physical therapists about BFR technology. Yep. And I'm like, well, this is kind of serendipitous, right? So I'm at the back, and I'm kind of like watching him. He had people signed up, and they're all back there, and they were doing things differently than what I was doing with the bands, right? Because all I was doing was putting them around my arms and putting them around my legs, tightening them up, and going to work out. And, I did a little bit of research behind the technology, but I just wasn't quite seeing or feeling what the research was saying. So I knew something was off, and maybe something was different. And I'm like, okay, maybe I need to tighten it more, or maybe I need to do this and that. But then I saw this very fancy machine that was connected to all these tubes, and people sitting down, and literally them being like, whoa. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna buy one of these systems. And so that's when I bought Katsu.
So you got the one with the machine, or did you get one of the ones that without the machine?
Yeah, I got the 2.0.
Okay, nice.
The portable one, yeah.
Yeah.
And when I got that, I was like, oh, and I listened to Mercola. Dr. Mercola speaks very highly of Katsu, and that was another reason why I decided to pull the trigger, because he's very convincing, and he talks about BFR more than anybody I know. And so I said, okay, let me go into it. So I got it, and I swear to you, Boomer, my first moment, not even a workout, because I was doing it by the book, because I wanted to make sure and do it properly. Yep. Which you start by putting it on the arms and doing some, hand squeezes and maybe mimicking some curls and different things. And I'm like, what? Like, what I felt with just doing that, immediately the brain switched on, and I'm like, okay, this is it.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, right? Because you think of it as sort of, and I've spoken to the Be Strong guys a little bit about this, but the pink dumbbells, right? That nobody wants to really touch, but you do 30 reps of pink dumbbells, and all of a sudden you're exhausted, no matter what you're doing. And it's, to me, it was just shocking the first time I put them on.
Yep. And that response should, again, make people very aware of like, well, wait a minute. If I felt that from this, what would I feel if I do this, right? Yeah. And so back to the point about it being portable, and, along with the inertia bands and the inertia wave, it's like, okay, you don't need to have weights, right? For instance, I loved the Katsu system so much So, and they're expensive, right?
Yeah.
But I loved it so much that I got my mom a pair, got my brother a pair, got my dad a pair, and I got my client Roger a pair. And
Sounds familiar. I've done this
yeah,
too.
yeah, right. And it's like, okay, let me take out the guesswork for anybody that I'm suggesting this to, because it could be cost prohibitive for some people. So okay, let me take that away. And also, I'm one to let anybody use mine
Yeah.
because I already know what it's going to do. And then that becomes a huge bang for your buck. So do you need anything with it? No, I mostly do body weight,
Yeah.
push-ups, squats, and there's, again, I've done some several podcasts with those guys as well. And so, people could see some of that information. I'm sure you've done it as well. So there's a lot that can be discovered within your own body with simple BFR. And the reason why I like Katsu over some of the other ones is because of that recovery component, that cycle mode, that, it takes the pressure up, brings it down, takes it up even higher, brings it down. And it does that 8 cycles, and that would conclude 1 full cycle. And I like to do that after training. And I also like to do that just when I'm hanging out. Like I would be doing that right now on this podcast, except that it's kind of noisy. It's, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I don't have them on. But these things are my babies.
I completely agree. Weekend trip, throw it in the bag. Same thing with the Inertia Wave now too, right? It's just, it's so portable and so damn efficient that it removes all excuses that people can have for movement as well.
Yeah.
Josh, I want to transition now into efficiency, effectiveness, quantification. And let's get into the last part, because I think my background's a little bit more on the quantified self side of life. And I've seen and have experienced personally what it's like to take quantification too far. Do you think people, when it comes to movement, can take quantification too far?
Yes. And like you, Boomer, I've taken it too far as well.
What does taking it too far look like for you, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, what is that paralysis by analysis? That term. I feel like when you go away from, dude, we should do a count for like how many times I say awareness.
I mean, we might just title the episode awareness, but
right. Yeah. It's, it goes back to like, if you are doing something so much so that you lose awareness, then I think it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
And, it's like, I started to learn that, okay, like for instance, I would use the halo, to like improve this and that. And, and I would use these devices to like show what I'm doing and this and that. And then I kind of started to rely more on the tech and the technology than my own tech and technology, which is this, the brain.
Yeah.
And so that would be the reason why I would say that I also sort of took it a little bit too far. Do you feel good with whatever movement you're doing? Do you feel like you're improving with whatever you're doing? Do you need a scale to show that? Sure, maybe in the beginning, I'm sure you have it, and I don't know where you are with it or not, but like in this whole tech world, I've used the smart scales and having it connect to the phone. And then what happens when things don't work well?
Yeah.
Then it's like, oh, wait a minute, this can't be right. The reading must be off. And then again, it makes you lose your own connection.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay, what is the point? I guess that would be my main thing when it comes to paralysis by analysis is, what is the point? At what point have you served the point of you going that far?
Yeah.
And once you can answer that question, then forego the analysis. You know what I'm saying? It's like, even with the Apollo, it's or the watch, right? No, but here, I'll give you an example. The Oura Ring.
Yeah.
I have this thing on right now, but it hasn't been working for the last week. So
Yeah.
they're sending me another one, right? And this has happened a few times, and it's the unfortunate side of tech, right?
Yeah.
But I have it on mostly because I kind of just like the feeling of it, and it's there, and and also it's a conversation starter, and
Yeah,
it's
the
a kind
first
of
generation in particular was a really good conversation starter.
right because it was bigger, and
Yeah.
I have that still sitting somewhere in my house somewhere, or
So do
my
I.
apartment. But yeah, it's also in today's world, or this climate that we're literally within right now. It's anything that can connect a person. I will keep, right. So
Yeah.
I wear the Apollo sometimes when I'm out and about, because I know it looks like a what is it called, those home monitors, what are those things called, like the probation, like if you're at home,
Yeah.
house
So
arrest.
this is actually kind of funny because I was walking to the grocery store here in the Netherlands, which nobody has the Apollo.
Mm-hmm.
And a guy pointed at me, shouted at me in Dutch, and then I eventually got him to speak English because my Dutch is horrible. And he asked me, he's like, so he basically said, police gave that to me too. And I was like, oh, really? So, I mean, I meant to, we'll release this one and I'll tell Raven about it. But yeah, it's a good conversation starter, like you say, right? Like people
Yeah,
immediately are like, okay, what is that? There's got to be a backstory there.
bingo. It's I normally have my arc crystal, dangling from my
You and
neck.
our mutual friend have one of those, and I
Yes,
probably will end up with one soon. So
dude, I absolutely love it, but it's probably the biggest conversation starter.
yeah.
And again, what is the point of that, right?
Hmm.
Some people literally, and people who know me, they're already prepared for, okay, what is Josh gonna have today, or what is he talking about? And that's fine, because again, what is the point?
Hmm.
I do it because of what it allows for me and my network, my community, my people.
Hmm.
And that could be anybody. We never know, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm at Erewhon, or like for instance last night, my Uber driver, I don't always have conversations with my Uber drivers, because sometimes it begins to be annoying.
Hmm.
But for whatever reason last night, I get in, and this guy, young guy with a new car and whatever, he starts asking me about my necklace, my art crystal.
Hmm.
So I tell him about that. And he's just like, dude, what is it you do? And, I was going from one location to the next, and we had about 25 minutes of travel time together. And I now have a friend, like we
Yeah.
connected on Instagram, and, the guy ordered an X3 bar because of me. And he
Nice.
asked me about, like, he's a hard gainer, right?
Yeah.
So, which I've worked with a few hard gainers, people who are super thin, and it's hard to put on weight, right?
Hmm.
Which is almost the opposite of what you would think that my job would be, is to help people lose weight, especially in America. um, but this guy was just like, dude, what, and he sees me, right? I'm a big dude, and he's like, hey man, like, what's some ways that I could gain some weight? Now, obviously, I can be like, oh, I'm on a call, I can't really talk, or I can say, you know what, this is harmless, I'll give you some free advice, right? And
Yeah.
so I talked about my podcast and listening to some different podcasts and things like that. But then, we go down this rabbit hole. But why did we even get there? Because of the things that I have on me,
Yeah.
right? And
Absolutely.
so that's my purpose, and that's a diversion from what we were really talking about with the paralysis by analysis. But it goes back to the purpose. What is your
Hmm.
purpose?
Josh, my friend, this is an epic conversation. We can probably go
Thank
on
you.
for a little bit of while. A little bit of while. That's even good English. I need to really I want to transition now into some final four rapid fire questions because I'm sure we're going to have future conversations. But
Absolutely.
first question that I have for you is, what is the book, and this can be in any domain, that has most impacted your life?
Ooh, okay. I would like to say two. One is the book that I'm currently reading right now, called Breath by James Nestor.
Okay.
And if I can give two, I would say that one. And then the other one is The Fat Burn Fix by Dr. Kate Shanahan.
Oh, nice.
So
Is that her new book, or is that because
yeah,
she was deep nutrition, right? And that was one of my
exactly.
favorites as well.
Exactly. If you like deep nutrition, please check out the Fat Burn Fix. And I guarantee you, you or anyone else that happens to pick up that book, you will be pleasantly surprised and probably thankful for having the recommendation, because it's like, if I wasn't reading this book Breath right now and that wasn't in the forefront of my brain, easily hands down Fat Burn Fix. I got about halfway through the book and I had already surpassed, on Instagram, you can do the highlights,
Yeah.
right? And the highlights for the different amounts of photos or videos you can put on there, it stops at 100.
Mm-hmm.
I highlighted 100 and I was only halfway through the book.
Wow.
And it's the most screenshotted book that I've had to date. And I've read some epic books, man, but that book taught me so much about the problematic oils that we consume and just a multitude of things. So it's a game changer, and so is Breath.
Yep. Thank you, Amazon. My Amazon account's gonna get hit tonight. But all right. What excites you most about the health world right now?
The fact that we can really change and we can see lots of improvement, and we have a lot of room for improvement, I think is what excites me the most. There's a lot of room for improvement and ways to tweak our lives and our environment and our lifestyle. I think that's probably the most exciting for me, is because I love to create change. In fact, it goes back to my mantra, which is our bodies and minds adapt to what we do most of the time. If you want to change your body and mind, you must change what it is you do most of the time. And with that, it's like the only constant in the world is change, right? That's another quote. And so if you embrace that, then that should be one of the most exciting things that we have on this journey called life.
Amazing. Top trick for enhancing focus?
Blue carnitine.
I did not ask you to say that, by the way.
Right. Yeah, I would say low-hanging fruit would be meditation.
Okay.
And whatever that means for a person, right? Because, meditation does not have to always look the same, sound the same, feel the same. But whatever it is that allows you to dig deep within yourself, within your mind, it goes back to what we talked about before. Turn off all the lights, turn off all the devices, put on some candles, and listen to what your body's telling you. And that would be considered meditation in my point of view. But I think that's one thing that helps to enhance focus for sure.
Awesome. Where can people find out more about you, Josh?
Yeah, well, nowadays it's pretty easy. Social media, all the social media platforms, I've been fortunate enough to have the same sort of username, which is Joshua J. Holland, JOSHUAJHOLLAND. And it's kind of interesting because the middle initial J is because my middle name is Jay, right? But it's kind of a play on words there. But so yeah, Joshua J. Holland, which is the same. My website is joshuajholland.com. And I also have a podcast like you, my friend. It's Simply Walk the Talk. So you can find us at simplywalkthetalk.com or on any of the podcast platforms. And hopefully I can get you on my show at some point. So I can.
You tell me when. You're a tough act to follow, man. So I'm gonna need some fair amount of prep time, but we'll do it soon. Josh,
sounds good.
This is amazing. First of many conversations to come, and yes. I'm hoping that the next couple will be in person, but we have to fix some travel. In the meantime, thank you,
Absolutely.
Sir.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Awesome. To all the superhumans listening, have an epic day.